Last time we took a look at functions and everything related to them, and this time we will be taking a look at arrays even further, since that's what was left over from the previous video. Simply put, arrays can be considered a container for various pieces of data. Those pieces of data don't have to be of the exact same type in JavaScript, although in other programming languages that would be the case. But here we could actually put multiple pieces of data of different data types together, such as strings next to booleans, numbers, even null and undefined values, although those don't tend to be used all that often. Okay, so to show how an array looks like, I'll just create a constant, call it array, and just open and close the square brackets. Now this basically initializes an empty array, and everything we put inside would be separated by comma, would be treated as separate data pieces. So I'll put a string, a boolean, null, and a number here. Now one of the most important things when it comes to arrays is getting the items from within the array. It's nice and cool when we have everything here, but when we need a separate piece of data, that's when index selection comes in. So if I would want to take the first item from the array, I would do it by simply invoking the name of the array and then opening the square brackets and typing the number of the ordinal position of the element inside of the array. Now since this is the first element, we would expect to put number 1 here, but arrays start at 0. They're 0 indexed and 0 based, so the first element would actually be the array of index of 0. So let's log it to the console and run the file. And we get the first item. 1 would be for the second, for example. An interesting property that arrays have is the .length method. Strings also have that, and strings and arrays are very closely linked by how they work. But I'll show it right here. So if we type array.length, well, actually if we console log it like this, we will get the length of the array as a number. In this case, not like a zero-based index system, but the number of items, so 4. Let's clear this, run this, and here it is. Now, aside from this that I have shown here, there are a couple of nifty functions. Well, I would call them simple methods used with arrays, and I will show them right now. The first one of which would be the array.at method. It's basically the same as getting the element by index, except that it can also take negative numbers. So if we put -1 here, it will select the first element from the back. And I'll show this by logging it to the console. Here it is. The next method is called concatenation, or .concat, and it is used to merge 2 or more arrays, or one array and some other value. Now this method doesn't change the array, but returns another one, so it can be captured inside of a variable. Well, everything we've done up until now can be captured inside of a variable, but let's do it for this one. So this will be array.concat, and I'll actually add an array of numbers from 1 to 5, and we'll log it to the console. Now once all the values are concatenated, they will be flattened into a single array, and that's what will be returned in the end. Let's just comment all of these logs here and run the code. And here it is, everything inside of a single flattened array. Given that arrays contain multiple values, we might want to get them down together to just one value. And to reduce them to a single value, we can use the method array.join and put the delimiter or separator here as a parameter. In this case, if we put like just the empty string, it'll concatenate everything in here into a single string, except for the value null, because it basically represents the absence of value. So if I console.log this and run node, it's exactly what we get. The following methods will be concerned with adding to or removing items from the array, and more specifically to or from the front or the back. So let's create a new array here and call it x, and just give it some numbers. If we wanted to remove the last number from this array, we would use the method x.pop. Now this method returns the last value here, so we can capture it in a variable, last of x. And it also mutates this array, so after this code is executed, the value in the x array will be 1, 2, 3, and 4. And if we wanted to add an item to the end, we would use the .push method, which would also mutate the array, added with push. And these are the guys concerned with removing from the end and adding to the end. Now if we want to remove an item from the beginning, we would use the .shift method, and it would also mutate the array and remove the first item. And if we wanted to add the item to the beginning, we would use the unshift method and provide an item here. Now I will log the value of x here, and when I run it and just comment unnecessary logs here, it's exactly what I get. So we basically mutated the first and last value by using these 4 methods here. In some cases we won't be getting the standard one-dimensional array, something like this here in the x constant, but something that is called the multi-dimensional array, which is an array inside of an array. And to prove that, I'll create an array here. Now if we would like to get an array just a singular dimension and remove these, square brackets, we would have to call the dot flat method. Of course, the dot flat method returns a new array, so we would have to capture it in a variable, and if we simply log it to the console and run the file, it's exactly what we get. And the last important thing here is the method to check whether the array contains a specific value. We in the beginning had to use like indices here to get the element, but if we know the name of the array, and let's use the array from the beginning, we can simply call the dot includes method and pass some value. If I pass hello, it'll return true, but if I pass world, for example, it'll return false. So I'll console.log both of those cases here, and I'll simply comment this, save and run, and it's exactly what I get. The last thing left to do is something I mentioned in the previous video, and that's higher order functions. They pair well with arrays, and there are loads of methods that are actually higher order functions built onto the array prototype. So higher order function is basically a function that either takes or returns a function either as a parameter or as a return value. So what that means basically is that in our case here with arrays and higher order methods, we can simply pass a function as a parameter, as an argument, and the higher order method will actually execute the function for each of those elements, and in some cases just leave it at that, and in others return a brand new array. So to start off with higher order functions, I'll go ahead and create a new array, and I'll call it HOF, and in this case I'll use only numbers because it's easier to work with. 15, 50, 100. But also I mean, you could use any data type here as long as you use the proper methods to manipulate them. So the first higher order function doesn't have a return value, it's void, and it's called for each, and it basically does what it says. It takes a callback function and executes it for each of the elements in the array, and it takes an element and its index as the parameters. I mean, that's what we get. In our case, I'll simply log the element and the index. For each. Actually, I'll use template literals here. Take the element and the index. So that's the for each function. I'll simply comment this out and I'll run the for each. And here we go. We get the value from the element and its indexed position. The next method is the map method, and it actually returns a brand new array, so we'll have to capture it in a variable, and I'll call it the HOF map. It'll be the HOF.map, And in our case, we also get the element in the index here, but we'll just need the element. And in our case, let's just increment every element by 1 and simply log the HOF map. And comment this out, save, and yep, every single element was incremented by 1. The following two methods basically do the same thing, so I'll create a single function for them, and I'll check if the number from the HOF here is over 10, and I'll create an arrow function. So is over 10. Okay. Now these two functions are called find and filter, and what they do is basically they take the function, go over through the elements, and find returns the first element that passes this condition, in our case greater than 10, so that'll be 15, while the filter method actually returns an array of all values that pass the criteria. So of course, since they return values, we'll have to capture them in their own variables. So HOF find, HOF.find, and I'll simply pass the is over 10 function. Same for the filter. And now I'll console.log both of these just as soon as I comment this, and I'll have HOF find and HOF filter. Save and run, and yeah, exactly what I said. The following two functions are also closely related, and I'll use the same method I've just created here for these two, for the following two as well. But I'll first comment this. So these two methods are called sum and every, and what they basically do is they take this function as criteria and they pass through every single element, and every returns true if all the elements pass the criteria, whereas sum only checks if at least one of the elements returns true on the condition. And let's check that. Sum. I'll just pass the same function here and every here, and I'll just log them. Sum generally returns true, whereas every returns false in general, as will be the case here. The last method is a little weird, so bear with me. It's called reduce, and what it does is that it basically takes an entire array and it reduces it into a single value based on the criteria given in the function parameter. So that doesn't mean much to most people, but reducing an array to a single value can actually be helpful in a lot of situations. For example, we could pass the function for addition and add all of these numbers, or subtraction, or maybe we could check which item in the array is the largest and which one is the lowest. And I'll write a function to check for the largest number here. HOF reduce. So the reduce function is a bit different because it takes two values, the accumulator value, and the current value, usually abbreviated to A and V for brevity. Now, if the current accumulated value is larger than the value that we have passed in, return the accumulated value, otherwise return the regular value we have now. And this function will basically go through the array and return the largest item, number. In this case, 100. So HOF reduce. Let's just comment this, clear and run, and here it is. So far, that covers arrays for the most part. Thank you for watching.